After I won the lottery, my family demanded that I share half of the prize with my older sister, and I said no. The next day, they tore up the winning ticket I had hidden. I was 7 years old when I first understood what it meant to be invisible in your own home. My sister had just brought home a report card with straight A's, and my parents threw an impromptu celebration, cake from the bakery down the street, calls to relatives, the whole production. I had gotten A's and B's that same week. My report card sat on the kitchen counter for 3 days before my mother glanced at it and said, "That's fine, honey," without looking up from her phone. I learned early not to expect applause. My sister was 3 years older, and from my earliest memories, she occupied a space in our family that I could never reach. When she made the honor roll, my father would beam and tell anyone who'd listen. When I made the honor roll 2 years later, he'd nod and say something about keeping it up. It wasn't malicious exactly. More like I existed in a different category altogether, one that didn't warrant the same attention. Our house was comfortable, the kind of middle-class suburban home where nothing was ever quite enough, but nothing was ever truly lacking either. My father worked in insurance. My mother was a dental hygienist. They weren't wealthy, but they weren't struggling. They had dreams for their daughters, though it became clear those dreams had a hierarchy. I remember sitting at the dinner table one evening when I was maybe 10 years old. My sister had just been accepted into some advanced academic program, and my parents were discussing how they'd need to budget for the extra tutoring costs. I mentioned that I'd won second place in the school science fair. My project on water filtration had taken me weeks. My mother smiled vaguely and asked my sister if she needed new clothes for the program orientation. The conversation moved on. I stared at my plate and felt something harden inside my chest, small and cold. The pattern repeated itself in countless small ways. Piano recitals where they'd take dozens of photos of my sister and maybe 2 of me. Birthday parties where hers always had a theme and a guest list, while mine were family dinners with a grocery store cake. Christmas mornings where her pile of gifts towered over mine. I told myself it didn't matter, that material things weren't important, but children understand fairness in ways adults pretend to forget. But here's what nobody tells you about being the unfavored child. You get to see everything clearly. You notice things. Like how my sister's shoulders would tense whenever my parents praised her, how she'd bite her nails raw before big tests, how she'd cry in her room when she got a B+ in chemistry, terrified of disappointing them. I'd hear my mother's voice through the walls, sharp with worry. "You're better than this. What happened?" The pressure on her was immense, I could see that. Every achievement raised the bar higher. Every stumble was analyzed and corrected. While I floated through school with minimal oversight, she lived under a microscope. Sometimes I'd catch my father checking her homework at the kitchen table, his jaw tight with concentration, while my own assignments lay untouched in my backpack. One afternoon when I was 13, I found my sister sitting on the back porch, staring at nothing. She'd just gotten her driver's license on the first try, something my parents had celebrated with a new car they'd been saving for. I sat down next to her, expecting her to be happy. "You're so lucky," she said quietly, not looking at me. "Lucky how?" I almost laughed. She had everything. "You get to be yourself. They don't care what you do." She picked at a thread on her jeans. "Everything I do matters. Every grade, every choice, every friend. It's exhausting." I wanted to feel sorry for her. Part of me did. But sitting there in my hand-me-down jacket, while she worried about the weight of privilege, I couldn't quite manage it. "Must be nice," I said, "to have them care at all." She looked at me then, really looked at me, and something passed between us. Recognition, maybe, or understanding. But then my mother called her inside for dinner, and the moment evaporated. She stood up, brushed off her jeans, and walked away. I stayed on the porch a while longer, watching the sunset over the fence line, feeling that familiar weight settle back onto my shoulders. The years that followed set a pattern I'd come to know intimately. My achievements were expected. Hers were celebrated. My failures were proof of my limitations. Hers were temporary setbacks to be solved with resources and intervention. I learned to survive on scraps of acknowledgement, while she learned to drown in expectations. We were both trapped, I suppose, just in different cages. And I'd be lying if I said I didn't sometimes wonder which was worse, being ignored or being suffocated. But mostly, I just wanted them to see me, really see me. Not as the spare daughter, not as the backup plan, but as someone who mattered on my own terms. I didn't know then that I'd spend the next decade of my life trying to earn what my sister had been given from birth, the simple gift of being noticed. The college acceptance letters arrived the same week, 3 years apart. My sister's acceptance to a prestigious private university was framed and hung in the living room. Mine, from a solid state school with a decent engineering program, got a refrigerator magnet and a comment about how practical my choice was. "We've set aside money for your tuition," my father told my sister over dinner the night she decided. "Full ride, room and board too. You just focus on your studies." I watched from across the table, fork frozen halfway to my mouth. I'd be starting college in a few months. Surely they'd saved for me too, even if it wasn't as much. I waited for him to mention my plans. He didn't. The next morning, I found my mother sorting bills in the kitchen. My hands were shaking when I asked, "So, about my tuition for next year?" "Oh, honey," she didn't look up. "You'll need to apply for scholarships, financial aid. Your father and I talked about it, and with your grades, you should qualify for plenty of help. Your sister's program is quite expensive, you understand." But I thought, I stopped. What had I thought? That they'd treat us equally? "You're resourceful," she said. "You'll figure it out." I did figure it out. I applied for every scholarship I could find and scraped together partial funding. For the rest, I took out student loans with interest rates that made my stomach turn. The financial aid officer explained the repayment terms with practiced sympathy. 20 years of payments. I'd be 41 when I finally finished paying for an education my sister got for free. My sister moved into a modern apartment near campus with a roommate whose parents owned a software company. I moved into a cramped dorm with cinder block walls and a window that wouldn't fully open. She posted photos of her campus. Manicured lawns, historic buildings, students lounging under oak trees. My campus was functional, efficient, crowded. I loved it anyway because it was mine. The real difference hit during that first semester. While my sister attended mixers and joined sororities, I got a job at a restaurant called the Riverside Grill. Not for extra spending money, for survival. I worked the dinner shift 4 nights a week and weekend brunch, taking orders from families who didn't look at me when they spoke, who left 15% tips and thought themselves generous. My classes were at night because those were the only sections that fit around my work schedule. I'd serve tables until 10, drive back to campus, and study until 2 or 3 in the morning. Coffee became a food group. Sleep became a luxury. My eyes burned constantly from exhaustion, and I learned to function on 5 hours a night, then 4, then however much I could grab. The loans accumulated. First year, 15,000. Second year, another 18. The numbers piled up like sandbags against a flood. I went home for Thanksgiving our second year. My sister had gained weight. The dining hall and late-night pizza, she joked. She looked healthy, rested. I'd lost 12 pounds I couldn't afford to lose, and there were permanent shadows under my eyes that no amount of concealer could hide. "You look tired," my mother observed over dinner. "I work 40 hours a week on top of classes," I said flatly. "I'm always tired." "Well, that's character building," my father said. "Your sister doesn't have time for a job with her course load. It's quite demanding." I took engineering classes. At night, after working a full shift, but I didn't say that. I'd learned that defending myself only made me look defensive. My sister caught me alone later, washing dishes while everyone else watched football. "I know it's not fair," she said quietly. "The money thing. Then why don't you say something?" I didn't turn around. Just kept scrubbing a pan that was already clean. What would I say? "I didn't ask for this." "You didn't refuse it either." She was quiet for a moment. "You're so independent. Sometimes I wish I could be like that. Make my own way." I finally looked at her. She was wearing a new sweater, expensive looking. Her hair was professionally highlighted. She held a glass of wine our parents had poured her without question, while I was still being carded. "Independence isn't a choice when it's your only option," I said. "It's just survival dressed up in prettier words." She flinched, and I felt a small, mean satisfaction at finally landing a blow. Then she left, and I was alone again with the dishes and the reality that nothing would change. She'd keep accepting everything they gave her, and I'd keep scraping by on nothing, and we'd both pretend this was somehow normal. By junior year, I was running on fumes. My GPA held steady, somehow, but socially I was a ghost. No time for clubs, parties, or friends, just class, work, homework, sleep, repeat. I watched other students having the college experience everyone talks about, and I felt ancient, already old at 23. The loans kept growing. The exhaustion became chronic. And through it all, I told myself I was building something. Independence, resilience, character. But mostly I was just building debt and resentment, one shift and one payment plan at a time. Graduation came and went with the usual disparity. My sister's ceremony 3 years earlier had involved a weekend trip, a nice dinner, and a pearl necklace. Mine got a card with $50 and a "we're proud of you" that felt obligatory. I didn't care anymore. I had my degree, my crushing debt, and a job offer from a mid-sized engineering firm that paid $38,000 a year. It wasn't much, but it was mine. The office was in a converted warehouse downtown, all exposed brick and industrial lighting. I shared a desk cluster with 3 other junior engineers, and for the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. The work was straightforward at first, reviewing blueprints, running calculations, assisting senior engineers with site visits. I was good at it. Unlike family dynamics, engineering made sense. I'd been there about 4 months when I first met the businessman. His company was renovating an old commercial building into mixed-use space, and he'd hired our firm for the structural assessment. He was in his early 60s with gray hair and wire-rimmed glasses, the kind of man who listened more than he spoke. During our first site meeting, he asked my opinion on a load-bearing wall issue, and I gave him an honest answer that contradicted my supervisor's initial assessment. My supervisor shot me a look, but the businessman nodded slowly. "Show me your math," he said. I did. He studied my calculations, then turned to my supervisor. "She's right. We'll need to reinforce this differently." After that, he started requesting me specifically for his projects. Not the senior engineers, me. He'd call the office and ask if I was available for consultations. He'd email questions directly to me, clearly valuing my input. "You're thorough," he told me once, "and you don't just tell me what I want to hear." That's rare. The recognition was oxygen after years of suffocation. Someone saw my work, valued my competence, treated me like I mattered. I found myself working harder on his projects, staying late to double-check calculations, researching better solutions. It wasn't about impressing him. It was about proving to myself that I was worth the effort. My parents, predictably, had different concerns. "You're still living at home," my father said one Sunday morning, ambushing me with coffee and a printed spreadsheet. "We need to discuss your contribution to household expenses." I stared at the numbers. He wanted $400 a month for rent, plus utilities and groceries. "My sister lived here for free when she was starting out," I said carefully. "Your sister was in graduate school," my mother interjected. "That's different. She worked part-time at a boutique. For fun. She was establishing herself." My father's tone suggested the discussion was over. "We're not asking for much. Just your fair share." Fair share. I'd paid my own way through college while they funded my sister's entire education. I'd worked 40-hour weeks while she pledged sororities. I'd graduated with $38,000 in debt while she graduated debt-free. And now they wanted my fair share. I paid it. Not because it was fair, but because I had nowhere else to go yet. My salary barely covered the loan payments, the rent, and basic necessities. Saving for a security deposit would take months, so I stayed in my childhood bedroom, now costing me $400 a month, and felt the resentment crystallize into something harder. My sister, meanwhile, had moved back home after graduating. She was finding herself, which apparently meant working part-time at a boutique and spending the rest of her time on social media, curating what she called her personal brand. She paid nothing. When I pointed this out to my mother, she said, "Your sister is going through a transition period. You're established in your career." Established. I was 24, making barely enough to survive, and drowning in debt. But sure, established. The businessman noticed the stress. During a routine site check, he asked if I was sleeping enough. I laughed and told him sleep was a luxury. He didn't push, but later that week, he emailed me about a consulting opportunity, a side project his company was developing. The pay was modest but significant for me. "You've got good instincts," he wrote. "I trust your judgment. Interested?" I was. Not just for the money, though God knows I needed it, but for the validation. Someone believed in my skills enough to hire me independently. The work wasn't charity. It was legitimate consulting. I said yes immediately. That extra income became my escape fund. Every dollar I didn't absolutely need went into a separate account, hidden from my parents' view. Slowly, the number grew. 200, 500, 1,000. I watched it accumulate with the same fervent attention I'd once given to my student loan balance, except this time the number represented freedom. At home, the dynamic worsened. My sister's transition period stretched into months. She'd sleep until noon, spend afternoons at coffee shops taking filtered photos of lattes she charged to my parents' credit card, and complain about how hard it was to find meaningful work. She lived like a trust fund kid in a home our parents could barely afford to maintain. And I paid rent. I paid for groceries. I paid my fair share. I built my competence through work and my escape fund through sheer stubborn will. And I waited for the day when I'd have enough saved to leave for good. A year passed in a blur of blueprints and rent payments. I turned 25 in March, celebrated with a cupcake from the office break room and a text from my sister asking if I could cover her car insurance. I said no. It felt surprisingly good. The consulting work with the businessman had grown steadily. What started as occasional side projects had evolved into reliable income. More importantly, it had shown me I was good at this. Not just competent, actually good. You should think about going independent, he told me one afternoon in April. We were reviewing plans for a residential development in his office. Starting your own consultancy. I laughed. With what capital? I'm still paying off student loans. You don't need much to start. A business license, insurance, maybe a website. Your reputation will do the rest. He leaned against his desk. I'd be your first client. I'd refer you to my network. You've got the skills. You just need to bet on yourself. The idea took root immediately. My own business. My own clients. Freedom from the 9-to-5 grind. The ability to choose my projects. Set my rates. Build something entirely mine. I spent 3 weeks building a business plan. Not a vague outline, but a real plan. Projected expenses, potential clients, marketing strategy, timeline for profitability. I researched LLC formation, insurance, and pricing. I stayed up until 2 or 3 in the morning, running numbers and refining projections. The startup costs were modest, $5,000 for the first 6 months. I had $2,000 saved. I needed 3 more. I could get a business loan, but the interest rates were steep and approval uncertain with my existing debt. The logical solution, however uncomfortable, was obvious. Ask my parents. $3,000 with a clear repayment plan, less than they spent on my sister's monthly expenses. I practiced the conversation before approaching them one Sunday evening. My father was in his study, my mother reading in the living room. I asked them both to sit down. I want to start my own engineering consultancy, I began, keeping my voice steady. I've been doing consulting work for a year, and I've built a strong relationship with a client who's offered to mentor me and provide referrals. My mother's expression was already skeptical. I handed my father a printed copy of my business plan, 20 pages of research and projections. He flipped through it without reading. I need $3,000 for startup costs, I continued. I've saved $2,000 already. I'm asking for a short-term loan, not a gift. I've outlined a repayment schedule. No. My father closed the folder and set it on the coffee table. Just like that. No. You didn't even read it, I said, trying to keep the desperation out of my voice. I don't need to. Starting a business is risky, especially for someone your age with your debt load. You have a stable job. That's more valuable than chasing some entrepreneurial fantasy. It's not a fantasy. I have a client ready to... One client isn't a business model, my mother interjected. What happens when he moves on? We're not enabling that kind of recklessness. You spent tens of thousands on her education, I said, my voice hardening. This is $3,000, a loan. Your sister's education was an investment in her future, my father said. This is different. We're trying to protect you from making a mistake. The conversation lasted another 10 minutes, but the outcome never changed. They wouldn't listen to my projections, wouldn't consider the business plan, wouldn't entertain the possibility that I might succeed. Every argument I made was dismissed with patronizing concern. I took my business plan back to my room and sat on my bed, staring at the pages I'd spent weeks perfecting. Pages they hadn't bothered to read. The rejection shouldn't have surprised me, but this felt different. This wasn't about favoritism. This was about actively preventing me from building something. The businessman noticed my mood during our next meeting. You asked them, he said. It wasn't a question. They said no. He was quiet for a moment. I could loan you the money. No. I said it too quickly. Thank you, but no. I appreciate everything, but I can't. I need to do this on my own. Pride is expensive, he observed, not unkindly. So is debt to someone who's already done too much for me. I managed a weak smile. I'll figure it out. I'll save up. It'll just take longer. The offer stands, he said. When you're ready. I believe in this, and I believe in you. That doesn't change because your parents can't see what's in front of them. Those words, I believe in you. I carried them like a talisman for weeks. Someone believed in me. Someone saw potential where my parents saw only risk. It didn't fix the rejection, didn't give me the money I needed, but it planted something important. The knowledge that their inability to see my worth wasn't a reflection of my actual value. I kept saving. The business plan stayed in my desk drawer. A promise to myself. The escape fund grew slowly. $2,300, then $25. Every dollar was progress, even if it felt glacial. I'd get there eventually. I'd prove them wrong. I just had to be patient. But patience was wearing thin. Something cold and determined was growing in its place. A resolution that when the opportunity came, when I finally had the resources to build my own life, I wouldn't let anyone stop me. Not my parents, not my sister, not anyone. 3 months after they rejected my business loan, my sister announced her big idea over Sunday dinner. She wanted to open a boutique. Urban clothing, trendy accessories, the kind of place where everything was overpriced and Instagram-worthy. "I've found the perfect location," she said, pulling up photos on her phone. "It's in the Arts District, right next to that new coffee shop. The rent is $2,500 a month, but the foot traffic is incredible." I watched my parents' faces, waited for the inevitable questions about her business plan, her market research, her financial projections. Instead, my father said, "How much do you need?" Just like that. No hesitation, no skepticism. "Well," my sister said, "I'd need about $30,000 for the first 6 months. That covers rent, inventory, fixtures, marketing, insurance." "We can do that," my mother said immediately, already smiling. I set my fork down carefully. $30,000. "It's a good opportunity," my father said, not looking at me. "Your sister has a vision. We want to support that." I asked for $3,000, for a business I'd already researched with a client ready to hire me. "You said no." The table went quiet. My sister's enthusiasm dimmed slightly. My mother's smile tightened. "This is different," my mother said. "Your sister has a comprehensive plan. She just came up with this weeks ago. I worked on my plan for months." "Let's not make this about you," my father said sharply. "We're discussing your sister's opportunity. Can you be happy for her, just once?" I looked at my sister. She met my eyes for a brief second, and I saw it. Guilt, awareness, the knowledge that this was wrong. But she didn't say anything. She never said anything. She just looked away. "I'm going out," I said, standing up. Nobody tried to stop me. I drove to the lakefront and sat in my car for 2 hours. $30,000. They had $30,000 to give away, and they'd told me $3,000 was too risky. The math was simple, brutal, impossible to rationalize. I wasn't worth the investment. I had never been worth the investment. The boutique opened 6 weeks later. My parents threw a launch party, posted endlessly on social media. I wasn't invited, or rather, I was invited in the way you invite someone you expect will decline. A perfunctory text 2 days before. I went anyway. Showed up in my work clothes, deliberately underdressed. The store was exactly what I'd expected. Exposed brick, vintage fixtures, racks of clothing with price tags that made me wince. My sister saw me come in, her face pleased and panicked at once. "You came," she said. "Wouldn't miss it," I said. "Looks good." "It's overwhelming," she admitted quietly. "I don't know what I'm doing. The inventory alone, I had no idea. And the supplier payments, the scheduling, the marketing." "You could hire help." "With what money?" "Most of what they gave me is already gone. Everything cost more than I thought." She laughed nervously. "I keep thinking they're going to realize I'm failing and be so disappointed." I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then I remembered my unread business plan. Remembered working 40-hour weeks through college while she pledged sororities. "You should have planned better," I said. "I know." Her voice was small. Sometimes I feel like no matter what I do, it's never good enough for them." "Must be nice," I said, "to fail upward with a $30,000 cushion." She flinched like I'd slapped her. I grabbed a glass of champagne and left. On the drive home, I felt hollow and angry and strangely liberated. I'd stopped pretending to be happy for her. The store struggled from the start. My sister had chosen trendy over timeless, aesthetic over practical. Instagram photos looked great, but sales were dismal. The overhead was killing her. Rent, utilities, insurance, unsold inventory. Within 3 months, she was panicking. I'd hear her on the phone with my mother, her voice high and strained. My parents kept floating her money. Another $5,000 here, $3,000 there. Money they'd claimed not to have when I needed it. I watched it happen with detached fascination. This was what they'd chosen to invest in, this failing vanity project. And my sister kept accepting their money, kept taking while the business circled the drain. One night, about 4 months after the opening, she knocked on my door. I was working on a consulting project. "Can we talk?" she asked. "I'm busy. Please." I turned around. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes. "I know you're angry," she started. "I'm not angry," I said. And I meant it. I was past anger. I was somewhere colder. "I just don't care anymore." "That's worse." She sat on my bed without invitation. I know I should have said something about the money, about everything. I know it's not fair. So say something now. Tell them to help me too. She was quiet for a long moment. I can't. You mean you won't? I can't, she repeated, tears in her eyes now. If I push back, if I question anything, you don't understand the pressure. Everything I do is scrutinized. You have $35,000 of their opinions, I said. I have $400 a month in rent. We're not the same. She left. I went back to my work. The cold thing inside me got a little colder, a little harder. And I kept saving, kept planning, kept waiting for my chance to escape. The lottery tickets started as a joke to myself. I was 26, living in my childhood bedroom paying rent to parents who'd given my sister $35,000 while refusing me $3,000. My escape fund had grown to $3,000, but apartment security deposits in this city required at least double that. I was stuck. Every Friday on my way home from work, I'd stop at the convenience store on Maple Street. $5, sometimes $10 if it had been a particularly bad week. Mega Millions, Powerball, whatever. I'd carefully fill out the numbers, fold the tickets into my wallet, and forget about them until the next drawing. It wasn't about winning. Not really. It was about 30 seconds of possibility between buying the ticket and reality setting back in. 30 seconds where I could imagine a life where money wasn't a constant calculation, where I could start my consultancy without begging, where I could leave this house and never look back. My sister noticed first. I was at the kitchen table one Saturday morning, checking the previous night's numbers on my phone. She walked in for coffee, saw the ticket in my hand, and laughed. You buy those things? She poured herself a cup, adding expensive creamer my parents bought specifically for her. That's just a tax on people who can't do math. Says the woman whose business lost $8,000 last month, I said, without looking up. Her face went tight. At least I'm trying to build something real. You're literally throwing money away on a fantasy. Isn't that what your boutique is? She left the kitchen without another word. But she told our parents because of course she did. That night at dinner, my father brought it up with the kind of concern that felt more like judgment. Your sister mentioned you've been gambling, he said. Lottery tickets. It's not gambling, it's $5 a week. That's $260 a year, my mother added. You could be putting that in savings. I almost laughed. You gave her $35,000 for a failing business. I buy $10 in lottery tickets a month. We're not going to have this conversation. That money was an investment in your sister's future, my father said. This is just hope, I interrupted. It's hope. That's what I'm buying, and it's my money. The judgment in their silence was deafening. My sister looked down at her plate, a small smile playing at her lips. She'd successfully redirected their disappointment onto me. The lottery tickets became a running joke in the house. My sister would make comments about winning big whenever she saw me. My parents would mention articles about lottery addictions. But sure, my $10 in lottery tickets was the real problem. At work, I tried to keep it private. But the businessman noticed during one of our site meetings. A lottery ticket fell out of my notebook. He picked it up, glanced at it, and handed it back without comment. The next week, he brought it up over coffee. We were discussing timeline projections, sitting in a cafe near the construction site. The lottery ticket, he said. You do that regularly? I felt defensive immediately. It's just a few dollars. I'm not judging. He stirred his coffee slowly. I used to buy scratch tickets every Friday for 3 years after my first business failed. My ex-wife thought I was crazy. I stared at him. This successful businessman had bought lottery tickets. Did you ever win? $50 once. Spent it on more tickets. He smiled slightly. But that's not why I bought them. I bought them because I needed to believe things could change. That luck wasn't just for other people. Something in my chest loosened. That's exactly it. We all need hope, he said. The form it takes doesn't matter much. Some people pray, some people buy lottery tickets, some people work themselves half to death. You do all three. It was the most seen I'd felt in years. Not judged, not mocked. Seen. I believe you'll get there, he continued, with or without the lottery. You've got drive, intelligence, work ethic. You're building something even if your family can't see it. The consultancy will happen. Maybe not on their timeline, but on yours. I had to look away because my eyes were burning. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just keep going. And if buying lottery tickets gets you through the week, buy the damn tickets. After that conversation, I bought the tickets with less shame. They were mine. My small rebellion. My weekly ritual of possibility. Every Friday, same convenience store, same routine. The clerk started to recognize me. My sister's boutique continued to fail. My parents continued to bail her out. I continued to pay rent in my childhood bedroom. And every Friday, I'd buy my tickets and allow myself those 30 seconds of imagining different. A life where I was valued. A life where I was free. I never expected to win. That wasn't the point. The point was refusing to give up hope, even when hope seemed stupid. The point was believing that somewhere, somehow, things could change. I just didn't know it would happen so soon. It was a Friday in late September, unseasonably warm for autumn. I'd had a particularly terrible day. My sister had called during a client meeting, crying about needing money for her lease payment. My mother had texted asking if I could loan her $300 to help out. When I said no, she'd called me selfish. I stopped at the convenience store on Maple Street like always. The clerk nodded at me. We'd developed that wordless familiarity. I filled out a quick pick for Powerball, added $5 for Mega Millions, and barely glanced at the numbers. At home, my sister was in the living room on her laptop, probably updating her boutique's Instagram. My parents were in the kitchen discussing their dwindling retirement account. Conversations that always circled back to how my sister's store would turn around soon. I went to my room, tried to focus on a consulting project. Couldn't. The texts from my mother kept coming. Your sister is really struggling. We all need to pull together. It's just $300. Around 8, I gave up and turned on the TV. The lottery drawing was on. Background noise while I scrolled through job listings. The numbers started appearing, and out of habit, I pulled the Powerball ticket from my wallet. First number matched. Second, third, fourth. My heart started pounding. Fifth number. Sixth, all 6 numbers. Perfect match. $3 million. I stared at the TV, then at the ticket, then back. They were already moving on to the next segment. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the ticket. $3 million. My first instinct was to scream, to run downstairs and tell everyone. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the months of being dismissed and mocked. Maybe it was my mother's texts demanding money while sitting on $35,000 they'd given my sister. Maybe it was just self-preservation. I sat there for 10 minutes just breathing. Then I Googled what to do if you win the lottery. The advice was consistent. Tell no one, sign the ticket immediately, get a lawyer, keep it secret until you've secured everything. I signed the back of the ticket with a pen I'd used to sign my student loan documents. Then I took photos and uploaded them to 3 different cloud storage accounts. I wasn't taking chances. Saturday morning, I drove to the lottery office downtown. My hands were still shaking. The office was surprisingly mundane. Fluorescent lights, institutional carpet, clerks behind plexiglass. The clerk's eyes widened when I showed my ticket. Congratulations, we'll need to verify this. 20 minutes of paperwork. Verification, more paperwork. They explained payout options, lump sum or annuity. I chose lump sum. After taxes, roughly $2 million. The money will be processed and transferred within 2 weeks, the clerk explained. We'll need to take your photo with a ceremonial check for publicity purposes. The ceremonial check. They gave me an oversized cardboard check with $3 million printed across it. It was absurdly large, completely impractical, just for photos and publicity. The actual money would be a bank transfer. I posed for the photos with this ridiculous prop, then drove home with the giant check in my back seat. When I got home, I carried it upstairs carefully. It was too big for my desk drawer, so I slid it behind my dresser, out of sight. My sister knocked on my door around noon. Want to get lunch? I feel like we've been fighting too much lately. I looked at her standing in my doorway. Expensive highlights, designer jeans probably charged to our parents' credit card, completely oblivious to her privilege. No, I said. I'm busy. Come on, my treat. Well, Mom gave me her credit card, but still. I said no. She left, offended. Good. I was done performing gratitude for crumbs while she feasted. Sunday dinner was mandatory in our house, one of those family traditions my mother enforced with guilt. I sat at the table, cutting my chicken into precise pieces, while my parents discussed their dwindling savings, and my sister complained about a customer who'd returned a dress. We're going to need to tighten our belts, my father said, looking pointedly at me. Maybe you could contribute more to household expenses. I looked at him, at my mother, at my sister. They had no idea what was coming. They thought they could keep taking from me, keep dismissing me, keep treating me like I didn't matter. I set down my fork. I have something to show you, I said. My voice was steady, calm. I went upstairs and retrieved the ceremonial check from behind my dresser. It was awkward to carry, oversized and unwieldy. When I came back down to the dining room, all 3 of them stared. I held up the check. $3 million printed in huge letters across cardboard. Impossible to miss. Impossible to dismiss. I won the lottery, I said. The silence was beautiful. The silence lasted maybe 5 seconds. Then everyone started talking at once. Oh my God, my sister breathed, standing up. 3 million? That's incredible, my mother said. Our daughter won the lottery. We'll need to be smart about this, my father interrupted. Investments, taxes, financial advisors. I just stood there, holding the ridiculous check, watching them. They were already deciding, already assuming, already planning how to spend my money. My mother recovered first, composing her face into something like pride. Sweetheart, this is wonderful. This is a blessing for the whole family. The whole family, I repeated. My father leaned forward. This kind of money requires careful planning. We can help you. Like you helped me with my business loan? His jaw tightened. This is different. This is serious money. $3,000 wasn't serious? Let's not relitigate old arguments, my mother said quickly. This is a happy occasion. My sister had been quiet, staring at the check. Now she looked up. This could save my boutique, she said softly. There it was. Less than 2 minutes. The store is struggling, she continued, gaining confidence. But with the right investment, with enough capital to expand, this could turn everything around. You want my lottery winnings to bail out your failing business. Not all of it. Just half would be more than enough. You'd still have $1.5 million, and I could actually make the boutique work. I looked at my parents, waited for them to tell her how absurd this was. Instead, my mother nodded. That's actually quite reasonable. You'd both benefit. Reasonable. The word came out flat. As a family, we should support each other, my father said. Your sister's business has potential. Her business is failing because she has no plan. Because you gave her $30,000 without making her prove anything. Because you've spent her entire life telling her she's perfect, so she never learned to work for anything. That's not fair, my sister said, her voice shaking. You don't know the pressure? The pressure, I interrupted, and something inside me snapped into cold clarity. The pressure of getting a fully funded education while I worked 40 hours a week? The pressure of living rent-free while I pay $400 a month? The pressure of having parents who actually believe in you? You don't understand. No, you don't understand. I pulled out my phone, set it on the table. I have $38,000 in student loan debt. You have $0. I paid my way through school while you partied. I've been saving every spare dollar for 2 years just to afford a security deposit on an apartment, while you've blown through $35,000 on a store that loses money every month. That's not, my mother tried. I'm not finished. When I asked for $3,000, $3,000 for a business I'd actually planned, you said no. Too risky. You didn't have the money. I pointed at my sister. 3 months later, you gave her $30,000. No questions, no business plan. Just yes, because she's the one who matters. You're twisting this? My father said. But his voice lacked conviction. Am I? She's gotten everything from you. Money, support, attention, belief. And I've gotten rent bills and lectures about responsibility. I held the check close. This is mine. I bought the ticket. I won. Me. Not us. Not the family. Me. But you live in our house, my mother said weakly. I live in a bedroom I pay for. That's all you've given me since I was 18. So no, you don't get to call this a family windfall. And she definitely doesn't get half. My sister's face had gone pale. I'm your sister. Don't I deserve? Deserve? You deserve what you've earned. A failing boutique and $35,000 in parental welfare. What you don't deserve is my money. You're being cruel, she said, tears starting. You don't know what it's like having them watch everything I do. The store failing, it's killing me. They're going to be so disappointed. You know what killed me? Watching them not care. Watching them ignore every achievement. Dismiss every dream. Tell me my business wasn't worth $3,000 while throwing money at yours. You want to talk about pressure? Try having no one believe in you. Try being invisible in your own family. We've always, my mother started. You've always chosen her. Every time. In every way. And now you want me to choose her too. To give her half of the only lucky thing that's ever happened to me. I paused. No. If you don't share with your sister, my father said, his voice cold now, there will be consequences. You'll need to find somewhere else to live. I looked at him. This man who would throw me out over money he felt entitled to. Fine, I said. I was planning to move out anyway. Now I can afford it. I took the check upstairs, closed my door, and locked it. Behind it, I could hear raised voices, arguing, my sister crying. I sat on my bed with my ceremonial check and felt nothing. No guilt, no regret, no doubt. Just the cold certainty that I'd finally said what needed to be said. I barely slept that night. Not from anxiety or regret, but from adrenaline. I kept replaying the confrontation, my father's threat, my sister's tears. None of it moved me. I was done. Around 2 a.m, I started looking at apartments online. 1-bedrooms in decent neighborhoods, places with actual kitchens. Places where I wouldn't be paying rent to people who resented my existence. I bookmarked 7 listings. I must have fallen asleep around 4 because I woke to sunlight and voices downstairs. Angry voices. My sister's defensiveness. My mother's sharp interjections. They were still arguing about the money. I got dressed slowly, jeans, shirt, work boots. If I was getting thrown out, I'd be ready. I packed my laptop, important documents, my grandmother's ring. The essentials fit in my work bag. When I finally went downstairs around 9, the house was quiet. Too quiet. The silence felt calculated. I walked toward the dining room and stopped in the doorway. They were all there. My father, my mother, my sister. Sitting at the table like judges, and on the table in front of them, the check, shredded into dozens of pieces, scattered like confetti. I stared at it, at the strips of cardboard with fragments of letters. 3 million torn into Thi and Mil-Ion. My sister held the scissors like a trophy, her eyes bright with something like victory. There was wildness to her expression, desperation masquerading as power. We're not letting you tear this family apart, my father said. If you won't share with your sister, then no one gets the money. It's your own fault, my mother added. You forced us to do this. I couldn't speak. I just stood there, looking at the destroyed check at my sister's triumphant face. They thought they'd won. They actually thought. The laugh started small, just a huff of breath. Then it grew. I tried to stop it, pressed my hand over my mouth, but it kept coming. Laughter. Real, genuine, almost hysterical. The kind that makes your eyes water. What's so funny? My father demanded, voice losing certainty. I couldn't answer. I was laughing too hard, tears streaming down my face. I bent over, hands on my knees, trying to catch my breath. Every time I looked at their confused faces, I laughed harder. Stop it, my sister said, but there was tremor in her voice now. I straightened up, wiping my eyes. You destroyed the ceremonial check, the fake one, the cardboard prop they give you for photos. The color drained from my sister's face. She looked down at the scissors, then at the destroyed check, then back at me. No, she whispered. That was just cardboard, I continued. A prop. You destroyed a worthless piece of cardboard. My father stood up abruptly. You're lying. Am I? I pulled out my phone, showed them the official paperwork, the confirmation email, the deposit schedule. $2 million. After taxes. Direct deposit. Should hit my account by next Friday. The real ticket was processed 2 days ago. My mother made a sound like a wounded animal. But I said I won $3 million. I didn't say that check was the actual prize. That's what they give you for the photo op. The real money is already mine. My sister dropped the scissors. They clattered against the table. This isn't fair, she said, voice thick with tears. You tricked us. I didn't trick you. You assumed. You got greedy, vindictive, and stupid. You destroyed something without knowing what it was. You let us, my father started. I let you show exactly who you are. I let you prove that when you can't control me, you'll try to hurt me instead. Thank you for making this easier. I looked at each of them. My father, red-faced. My mother, pale. My sister crying, her triumph curdled into humiliation. I'm leaving, I said. Today. I'll be out by this afternoon. Where will you go? My mother asked weakly. Anywhere but here. I paused. Oh, and the boutique. It's going to fail. Not because I didn't help, but because it was always going to fail. You can't buy competence. You can't fund work ethic. My sister sobbed harder. Good. I went upstairs and started packing. Behind me, I could hear them talking, arguing, crying. But their voices were already fading, becoming irrelevant. In my bag, clothes, important papers, laptop, my escape fund, my phone, the business plan I'd written a year ago. I took one last look at my childhood bedroom, at the walls I'd stared at through sleepless nights, at the desk where I'd studied and planned and dreamed of escape. It was just a room. It had never been home. Home was supposed to be safe. Home was supposed to be where people saw you, valued you. This was just the place I'd survived until I could leave. I picked up my bags and walked out. I made it halfway down the stairs before my mother appeared at the bottom, blocking my path. Her makeup was smeared from crying. "Please," she said. "Please don't go like this. We can talk. There's nothing to work out." I adjusted my bag. "Excuse me. You're overreacting. We made a mistake. You destroyed what you thought was my lottery ticket out of spite, because I wouldn't give half my winnings to subsidize my sister's failing business. That's not a mistake. That's who you are." We were angry. People do things when they're angry. Angry about what? Angry that I finally said no? Angry that for once I have something you didn't give me and can't take away? She flinched. "We've always loved you. You've loved the version of me that did what you wanted. The quiet one who didn't complain, didn't ask for much. That version was very convenient." My father appeared from the living room. "You can't just walk away from family. Watch me. We're cutting you off," he said, voice hard. "No more contact. No more help. I've been on my own since I was 18. The only difference is now I won't be sending you rent checks." My sister came down the stairs behind me, her face blotchy from crying. She looked younger, stripped of her usual presentation. "Wait," she said, voice small. I turned to look at her, waited. "I'm sorry," she said, halting. "I'm sorry we destroyed the check. I know it wasn't fair. I know I've gotten more than you. I know you're right." "Okay," I said. Not forgiven, just acknowledged. "But if you leave," her voice broke. "If you leave, I don't know what I'll do. The store is failing, and I don't know how to do any of this without them, without help. I've never had to." There it was. The confession I'd always known but never heard spoken. My sister had no idea how to function independently. They'd given her money but not tools, privilege but not skills. "That's not my problem," I said truthfully. "But you could teach me. You know how to survive. You could help me?" "No." The word was final. "I spent 26 years watching you get everything while I got nothing. I'm not going to spend the next 26 teaching you how to be the person you should have become on your own." "That's cruel," my mother said. She's struggling because you never let her struggle. You smoothed every path, solved every problem, funded every failure. You created this." "We don't have any money left," my father said quietly. "We gave it all to her. Our savings are gone. We were counting on your lottery money to—" I stared at him. "You were counting on my lottery money to recover from your bad financial decisions?" His silence was answer enough. "What are we supposed to do?" my mother asked. "Figure it out. The same way I figured out how to pay for college. The same way I figured out everything, because asking you for help was never an option." I walked past my mother, heading for the door. My sister followed. "At least tell me how," she said desperately. "How do I make the store work?" "Close it," I said. "Close the store, cut your losses, get a regular job, learn to live within your means. But the money they spent is gone. It was always going to be gone." I reached the front door, pulled it open. Fresh air hit my face. "I can't do this without help," my sister said. "Then learn," I said. "Or don't. Either way, it's not my concern anymore." "You're really leaving," my father said. "I really am." I turned back one last time. "For what it's worth, I hope you figure it out. But mostly, I hope I never have to come back here." "When you change your mind," my mother started. "I won't. Goodbye." I walked out, down the steps, toward my car. Behind me, I heard my sister saying something, my mother crying, but I didn't turn around. I put my bag in the trunk and pulled out. In my rearview mirror, I could see them on the porch, watching me leave. I drove to the lake, parked, and sat there, just breathing, processing. I'd left. After 26 years, I'd finally done it. My phone buzzed. A text from my mother. "Please come home." I deleted it, then started calling the apartments I'd bookmarked. By evening, I'd signed a lease on a one-bedroom with good security. Move-in date? Next week. I paid the deposit without flinching. I checked into a hotel for the next few days, clean and quiet and mine. I ordered room service, took a long shower, and lay on the bed staring at the ceiling. I felt strange. Not happy exactly. More like light. Like I'd been carrying something heavy for so long I'd forgotten it was there. My phone buzzed again. My mother. My father. My sister with a long message about how sorry she was, but could I please help her with the store? I blocked all 3 numbers. Then I called the businessman. "I did it," I said. "I left." "Good for you," he said. "Are you okay?" "I think so. I will be. The consultancy offer still stands." "When you're ready." "I'm ready now," I said. And I was. The week between leaving and moving into my apartment passed in a strange, suspended state. I worked remotely from the hotel, functioned normally while my entire world had shifted. The businessman gave me a project immediately. "You need structure," he'd said. "Change is good, but too much at once can be destabilizing." He was right. Work kept me from spiraling into the guilt they'd tried so hard to instill. The texts kept coming before I'd blocked them. My mothers were desperate and manipulative in turns. "How can you abandon your family?" Followed by, "We love you and just want to help." My fathers were shorter, angrier. "You'll regret this." I saved them before blocking. Not to reread, but as evidence. Proof that I wasn't crazy, that my decision was right. My sister's messages cycled through emotions. First, apologetic. "I know I messed up." Then desperate. "The store is failing faster." Then angry. Always playing the victim. Then back to desperate. "Please, I'm drowning here." I didn't respond to any of them. I blocked their numbers on the third day. Moving day was simple. Most of my belongings fit in my car in 2 trips. The apartment was on the 4th floor, corner unit, with windows that actually opened and let in real sunlight, hardwood floors, a functional kitchen, a bathroom that was mine alone. I stood in the empty living room that first day and felt something crack open in my chest. Not breaking, opening. I bought furniture slowly, deliberately. A couch I actually liked. A desk for my home office. A bed frame that didn't squeak. Each one felt like a declaration. This is mine. The lottery money hit my account on schedule. $2 million minus taxes. I contacted a financial advisor immediately. Within a week, I had an investment strategy. Half went into conservative investments. A quarter into savings. The rest was working capital. I paid off my student loans in a single transaction. $38,000 gone in seconds. I watched the balance drop to 0 and cried. Relief tears. The weight I'd carried for 8 years disappeared. 3 weeks after leaving, a new number started calling. I answered once, stupid with hope. It was my sister. "Don't hang up. Please just listen." I should have hung up. Instead, I waited. "They're blaming me," she said, crying. "Mom and Dad. They're saying the boutique failed because I didn't try hard enough, because I refused to learn. They're saying if I'd been more like you..." Her voice broke. "They're actually saying I should have been more like you." I could believe it. When the golden child fell, someone had to take the blame. "They won't help me anymore," she continued. "I asked them to cover next month's rent on the store, and they said no. They said I need to figure it out myself, the way you did. But I don't know how. It wasn't fair when you got everything and I got nothing," I said flatly. "But you didn't care then." "I was young. I didn't understand." "You're 29 years old. You understood. You just didn't care because it benefited you. How did you get this number?" "I went through Mom's phone." "Please, you have to help me." "Good. Lose everything. Learn what it feels like. Maybe it'll teach you something." I hung up. Blocked that number too. Then I changed my phone number entirely. He took me to lunch the next day, sensing I needed support. We sat at a quiet restaurant downtown. "How are you really doing?" he asked. "I don't know," I admitted. "I feel guilty, which I know is irrational. I feel relieved. I feel angry that I feel guilty. Family usually is complicated." He looked at me seriously. "For what it's worth, what you did took more courage than most people manage in a lifetime. It doesn't feel courageous. It feels necessary. Those aren't mutually exclusive. You're going to doubt yourself. They programmed you to, but every time you do, remember what they did with that check." I nodded, throat tight. "You're not the villain in this story," he continued. "You never were." We talked about the consultancy after that. Real plans, real timelines. He had 3 clients ready to work with me, enough to sustain the first 6 months. Not charity. These clients needed expertise I had. For the first time in my life, someone's confidence in me felt earned rather than conditional. He believed in me because of what I could do. I went home that night to my apartment, my space, my new life. No voices down the hall. No criticism disguised as concern. No comparisons. Just silence. Just peace. Just the possibility of becoming whoever I wanted to be. It was terrifying. It was liberating. It was mine. 6 months passed. Then a year. Then it was 2 years since I'd walked out of that house, and the person I'd been that day felt like someone I used to know. The consultancy was thriving. I'd started with 3 clients, and they'd led to others. Word of mouth in the engineering community was powerful. I had a waiting list now. The daughter who wasn't worth a $3,000 loan had a client waiting list. I hired my first employee after 18 months. A young engineer fresh out of school, bright and hungry. I paid her well, gave her real responsibilities, made sure she knew her value. My apartment still felt like a miracle some mornings. I'd wake up in my own space with no one to answer to and feel profound gratitude. I'd bought art for the walls. Plants I actually kept alive. A coffee maker that represented freedom. The family's attempts at contact had dwindled over time. The first few months were relentless. New numbers, emails, letters. Eventually, the attempts became sporadic. A text on my birthday. We miss you. An email at Christmas. The door is always open. I never responded. I found out what happened to them through a mutual acquaintance who knew my mother. She mentioned it casually over coffee. My sister's boutique had closed after 7 months. She'd lost everything my parents had invested. She was working retail now, at a department store. Entry-level, hourly wage. She'd moved back home initially, but that hadn't lasted. Too much tension, too much blame. She was in a studio apartment now, learning what it meant to survive paycheck to paycheck. Part of me felt vindicated. A larger part just felt tired. My parents had depleted their retirement savings entirely. The boutique investment had wiped them out. They were both still working in their early 60s, jobs they'd hoped to retire from. They'd downsized to a smaller house, sold the car, made financial compromises they'd never imagined. They blamed each other. They blamed my sister. They blamed me. Everyone except themselves. I should have felt more about it. But mostly I felt nothing. They'd made their choices. I'd made mine. The businessman, Gregory, took me to dinner on the 2-year anniversary of leaving. We'd done this every 6 months. "You look happy," he said. "Actually happy." "I think I am," I said, realizing it was true. Not giddy happiness, but something steadier. Peace. "Have you thought about reaching out to them?" he asked carefully. "Sometimes, usually when something good happens and there's this instinct to share it. Then I remember who they are and the instinct dies. That's probably healthy. My sister tried to contact me last month. New number, left a voicemail. She sounded different. Tired, but more real than I'd ever heard her. She said she was sorry, that she understood now. Did you call back? No, I can't be her life raft. She needs to learn to swim on her own. You're not cruel, he said firmly. You're boundaried. There's a difference. We talked about the business after that, about expansion, about the future I was building. He was proud of me in a way my actual father had never been. I'd found better family in a professional relationship than I'd ever had in my biological one. The next morning, I drove past my parents' old house. Not the smaller one they'd moved to, but the one where I'd grown up. A different family lived there now. New curtains in my bedroom window. A swing set in the backyard. Kids' bikes on the lawn. I sat in my car across the street, looking at the house that had never quite been home, waiting to feel something. But it was just a building. Just bricks and memories that belonged to someone else now. I drove away and didn't look back. That evening, I sat in my apartment with tea looking out at city lights. My phone buzzed. A new client inquiry. I responded, set up a consultation, and felt the quiet thrill of work I was good at. Somewhere in this city, my family was struggling with consequences of their own making. My sister was learning what I'd known since I was 18. My parents were facing a retirement they hadn't planned for. I could have felt guilty. But I'd stopped setting myself on fire to keep them warm. I'd stopped accepting blame for their choices. I'd stopped waiting for them to see my value. I'd simply started living as if I had value, regardless of whether they saw it. And somewhere in that shift, I'd found something they could never give me and could never take away. Peace. Real peace. The kind that comes from knowing who you are and being okay with it. The rainstorm of their disappointment no longer touched me. I'd found shelter. I'd built a roof over my own head, with my own hands, with money I'd earned and luck I'd claimed and choices I'd made. And I was finally, genuinely, completely free.